Hola, comrades. Today's topic of interest, ARMS. At the official presentation of the Nintendo Switch on January the 12th, 2017, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild cast a shadow over literally everything else. This was Nintendo's drop the mic and walk away, and for good reason. They knew they had a great game, and indeed, Breath of the Wild dazzled the gaming world upon its release alongside the Switch 2 months later, in March. But there are many other important games showcased in that presentation, including Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I'm personally super excited for, as the original is my second favorite game of all time, Super Mario Odyssey, which looks to be more of a return to the series' 3D roots, which will be interesting, Splatoon 2, which from what I've seen is going to be more of everything I liked about the original, and this quirky new IP, ARMS, this bizarre fighting game that I'm going to make a case for being the most important game for the future of the Switch. First, let's establish that the Switch was never going to fail like the Wii U. Why Nintendo, despite having the best-selling system of the 7th generation, replaced theirs before Microsoft and Sony is beyond me, as is why they replaced it with this. The gimmick of the Wii U wasn't intuitive, the name was terrible, both making no sense and leaving a casual audience unsure if this was indeed a different system from the Wii, and its lack of big games was the nail in the coffin. For the Switch, Nintendo learned from its mistakes. This is the best idea for a system since the Wii, and maybe it's even better. The name makes clear what the system is about, and the early lineup is as good as they could make it. Launching the system with Zelda was both the obvious move and a very smart one. More so because they managed to launch it with maybe the best Zelda ever. So the Switch is doing well now, thanks to both Zelda and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but for its continued success, it's crucial that its upcoming games, especially in this, the first year of the system, perform well. Splatoon 2, the sequel to one of the few hit games on the sinking ship that was the Wii U, is going to do well. And Super Mario Odyssey is no doubt going to be one of the biggest hits of the generation. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is likely going to redefine the RPG genre. The curious creature is this fighting game, ARMS. The first thing I thought when I saw this game is, wow, this looks so dorky. When I watched the Nintendo Direct for this game in May, my thinking changed to, wow, this is so dorky, I love it. This is a fighting game where all the fighters have these long, springy arms. Why? Who knows? That's just the kind of game this is. Though the Switch could continue to succeed with just Nintendo's existing IPs, it would be tough. Third-party support would be a plus, but that's as much a result of the system doing well as a cause of it. See what happened with the Wii. It's to Nintendo's advantage to have a success with a new IP, and this can be it. Between Mario, Mario Kart, Zelda, and Pokemon, Nintendo has platformers, racing games, action RPGs, and turn-based RPGs covered. They didn't have a shooting franchise, so they got themselves Splatoon. It's a fun shooter that is also demonstrably Nintendo all the way through. They're going for something similar with ARMS. It's a fighting game with franchise potential, something Nintendo doesn't currently have, unless you count Super Smash Bros. But that's something fundamentally different from this in most mainstream fighting games, but could be lucrative for them, and I think they can pull it off. With such a wacky concept, the tone of the game needs to fit, and it looks like it will. I mean, listen to this.
For some reason, none of these superstar fighters can remember the moment they first realized they had the ARMS ability. They just woke up one morning and bam, extendable arms. In fact, one of the ARMS fighters, Springman, had this to say. I was shocked at first, but having arms like this is actually pretty rad.
Between this and Splatoon, I'm not sure how I feel about Nintendo's newly found love of the totally radical kitsch that dominated children's TV in the 90s, but it's welcome variety. Mario takes place in a fantasy universe, Zelda is the same, but it's more high fantasy, more Lord of the Rings-ish, more lore-driven, and the same could be said for Fire Emblem. Pokemon is modern, but more slow and methodical, as is Pikmin. About Kirby, that universe is all cute and bright colors. Splatoon and ARMS stand apart as something a little more energetic, a little cooler, a little more frenetic. They resemble Sonic, which at its best walk the line between being cool and trying too hard to keep up with the kids. But they're a little more self-conscious of their wackiness and a little sharper with their humor. Unlike Sonic and those 90s TV programs, Splatoon and ARMS aren't trying to keep up with the times. If anything, they're a little nostalgic. They are embracing this silliness because they want to, because they think there's humor and adventure to be had out of it. And it's a good look. I love the designs of the characters in ARMS. In Splatoon, despite the inherent absurdity of the idea of the Inkling, a creature that's half squid and half kid, the designs are honestly quite cool and fashionable. In ARMS, the absurdity is doubled down on. Take the character we've seen the most, Springman. He's dressed in normal sporty attire, except for his mask. But then he has not only these spring-loaded arms, but blue hair that looks like a spring. Who thought that up? I don't know whether to give them a medal or slap them across the face. And the other character designs are no less insane. Take Ribbon Girl. She also looks fairly normal aside from her mask, but then she has these arms made of ribbons, and also, and this is quite clever, hair made from ribbons. There are even ribbon patterns on her skirt. Or take Ninjara, who has metal arms and his green hair is in the shape of a shuriken. And lest you think all these characters are simply humans with weird attributes, another fighter, Master Mummy, is literally a mummy that's over 7 feet tall and has this dark purple skin, and he's not even the strangest fighter of the lot. The game's catchy main theme exemplifies this brand of beguiling insanity. Hearing these voices belt out, oh, whoa, whoa, whoas, and na, 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 nas, makes you want to laugh, but you're pumped up regardless, ready for some cartoony but intense combat. But how about that combat? It doesn't matter if the presentation is good if the gameplay doesn't back it up. Thankfully, there's little to worry about. It looks to be engaging, complex, and a good time for everyone. The kind of thing that's easy to get into but challenging to master. It takes its cues from other great fighting games while differentiating itself, and most importantly delivering a fresh experience from the games of the Super Smash Bros. Series. I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Nintendo already had a test run for this game. It was called Wii Sports. Yes, I'm far from the first to compare the slightly ridiculous but utterly compelling Wii Sports Boxing to ARMS, and not just because both those games feature otherwise fairly normal characters with these weird arms. In the case of Wii Sports, they're disconnected from the body. Common consensus says boxing was the best of the sports in Wii Sports. It was definitely what I spent the most time playing. There was more depth and strategy to it than tennis or baseball. Wii Sports is of course the ultimate pick-up-and-play game, and indeed, it introduced millions to what motion controls were capable of. But for players to stick with the sports like so many stuck with boxing, there has to be a replay value, a desire to come back. Part of the appeal of boxing was the personal nature of the showdowns. There is some of that in tennis, but in boxing you could see your opponent's me in detail as you lay the smacketh down on them. When you're playing with friends, or even against a computer, there's something satisfying in that, something you just can't get from the stilted, awkward Wii Sports baseball. So starting with the blueprint of Wii Sports Boxing is a good idea, but you need to add variety. How do you build from one part of a Wii launch title from 2006 to a smash new IP? Give the characters different abilities and playstyles, make them feel different. ARMS is doing this extremely well. Springman plays differently from Ribbon Girl, who plays differently from Master Mummy. This is where the more cartoony style of the game pays off. Without having to conform to realism, it's easier to differentiate these characters. They don't have to be just Human A and Human B. Just by looking at these characters, you can tell that they play differently. A teenage girl with a robot isn't going to play the same as a slime monster that can stretch itself to 8 feet tall. The necessity of differentiation is why fighting games have tended to feature these weird, unnatural aberrations of characters. But for ARMS, it's not seedy or disreputable. It's fun and boppy and friendly. There are bright colors and wacky antics and a delightfully hammy announcer, so the strange characters are more believable. They're not so far from what Nintendo normally does, and because the universe is so immersive and involving, because it's a place you want to be, it's easier to get used to the characters. You don't feel like you're in an illegitimate underground ring. You feel like you're in this wild amusement park, and that's something you can build a franchise off. As was the case with Splatoon and shooters, I can't wait to see how ARMS Nintendo-fies the fighting game genre. It is rare that Nintendo produces a new IP, with the last one before Splatoon being Pikmin all the way back in the early 2000s, but when they do, they don't miss. I like to see the next Mario and Zelda as much as anyone, but I also like to see something new, something that's not the norm. As opposed to the shooter or the RPG, the fighting game has an almost inherent silliness to it. There are few genres that lend themselves better to having their tropes exaggerated. This doesn't have to be for comedy, you can just as easily go the other way and have an outright gore fest, but it can be. And when I pictured a Nintendo fighting game that's not in the mold of Super Smash Bros., this is about what I had in mind. I can't tell if this will become a big IP that gets new installments with the release of every new console and sticks around for 50, 60 years. After all, franchises come and go. Not all can adapt with the times, see Star Fox, and not all are popular enough that they get the chance, see F-Zero, which has been left to die since the GameCube era, leaving an entire generation of gamers with no idea where Captain Falcon came from. But though I'm not sure how ARMS will be built into a long-lasting franchise, I am sure that if it is half as good as Splatoon, it will get that chance, and it will be a major boon for Nintendo. Having a game like this succeed on the Switch is more important than releasing the next big Mario and Zelda. Everyone knows those franchises can do well. That's been proven over the course of 30 years. Having a game like ARMS succeed is not only a shot in the arm, no pun intended, for the company because it gives them another new franchise, but because it proves the viability of the system as a whole, thereby attracting more third-party developers, who then produce more games that compel people to buy the system, which in turn increases the sales of the system. Obviously, the Nintendo branding is a huge reason for the excitement the game has generated, and it wouldn't be viewed the same if it were from generic game company X. But aside from that branding, it doesn't have much going for it from a marketing standpoint. Breath of the Wild succeeding on the Switch may pique the interest of third-party developers, but there's a sense of course it sold well, it was a Zelda game. If ARMS, a new IP, succeeds, that may convince the developers to take a risk. Sure, they'll say, this game had the full force of Nintendo on its side, but still succeeded despite being new. Maybe we should try to develop for the system. Maybe it's a good opportunity for us. In all, ARMS being a bad game would hurt Nintendo's reputation at a time when they are riding high, thanks not only to the success of Breath of the Wild, but also due to the popularity of Pokemon Sun and Moon and the unexpected hit that was Pokemon Go. ARMS selling poorly, however, would be even worse. It would discourage third-party developers from taking a chance on the system instead of going the safer route of developing for Microsoft or Sony platforms. The encouragement Breath of the Wild gave to these smaller developers might be lessened or dissipate entirely. This wouldn't make the situation into something comparable to the Wii U, but it would be a major obstacle in allowing the system to reach the heights of the Wii. However, there is nothing to suggest that ARMS either is bad or will sell poorly. Its appeal looks to be wide, with intuitive gameplay, a stellar aesthetic, and a balance between easy to access and worthwhile to master. If Nintendo can pull this release off and turn ARMS into their next big IP, they might as well declare 2017 their banner year, certainly their best since the days of the Wii. What would stop them? It's not like Mario Odyssey is gonna flop. The reputation as an also-ran, which had been mounting since the early 2010s, would be decimated, and it would be proven once again that Nintendo indeed does have a major important role to play even in this era of hyper-realism and immensely powerful systems. The big N will always have its detractors, but from an objective point of view, the company would be on solid ground. Some of that work, or even a lot of it, is already done, and ARMS doesn't have to bear all the burden, but it can be a major part of this renaissance. I'll be rooting for this silly, wacky, utterly bizarre game. I think it can do it. ARMS might seem like it's too weird to catch on, but may I remind you that Nintendo's three biggest franchises are about an overweight Italian plumber who has to rescue a princess from a fire-breathing turtle, an elven boy who dresses in green and is helped in his quest to save the world from a giant boar by fairies and imps, and a world filled with magical creatures that are entrusted to little kids for cockfighting purposes. We'll get used to the likes of Master Mummy and Ribbon Girl. Anyway, if you liked what you saw today, donate to my Patreon so I can produce more amazing content. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that precious stuff. Adios, comrades!